Hello everyone, here we are at the library, kinda sorta, flipping through books, trying to find some sort of information. Watase wondered that as he flipped through the pages and kept reading. The following conjecture is based off this theory. Even information itself can exist independently and can possibly interact, be conveyed, without the use of other force as an intermediary. For example, since the human's thoughts are a type of information, they can communicate with others without the need for those thoughts to be converted into another medium, such as electrical signals. This is somewhat extreme expression, and I'm using here, but this is the gist of the informational field hypothesis. The informational field is the place where information operates as the fifth fundamental force or energy. If we are to consider this by using the human brain as an example, the informational field generated from thought information may in fact be what we call the consciousness. It is still unclear as of this point as to what the process that creates a consciousness entails. All we do know is that a consciousness is generated inside the brain when countless memories, fragments of information, and electrical signals running through the synapses interact. However, another conjecture can be formed when you think on the basis of this hypothesis. If information can exist independently, then that means that consciousness does not necessarily have to form in our brain. If a fixed amount of information gathers in one spot and interacts with each other, a consciousness can be born right then and there. Furthermore, if information can be controlled, then it should be possible to artificially create a consciousness. Yeah, this doesn't make any sense to me. What kind of research does this Miyoko Tenkawa person do? She'd called herself an elementary particle physicist, but he got the impression that his research had more to do with biology. But to create a consciousness, why would anyone do that? What does research involving creating a consciousness have to do with nuclear power and biology? He wasn't sure why, but he felt a faint, ominous sensation. Despite that, he continued to read more of the book, and then gasped. In conclusion, the various theories laid out in the informational field hypothesis have yet to be proven, but this thesis has been reappraised in a form I never once expected. This is all due to a rapid yet drastic change that has recently swept society. That change is the manifestation of BC.
BC?
Yeah, we heard about that earlier on in the game. Some kind of communication, like you can convey your thoughts to another person. Quite interesting. Come to think of it, Ina had mentioned it before. She said that it wasn't all that rare for there to be people who could use telepathy these days. Watase continued to read. The ability known as BC has been widely acknowledged by society in the last few years. It can be said that this has resulted in mindsets towards the nature of information and ways of communication to undergo tremendous changes. We've also discovered countless people who possess this ability that we would never have conceived as feasible mere years ago. The abilities of BC can generally be classified into two groups. The first one is telepathy, the ability to directly send your voice to another's mind. The other is empathy, the ability to read the voice of another's mind. By describing these two abilities with these extremely coherent terms, we can explain them separately. When BC is used, the user's thought information is not converted into another medium. They communicate with their target by sending that thought information directly into their target's brain by using elementary particles as an intermediary. This matches up with what I proposed in my informational field hypothesis. Two completely unrelated fields of study, parapsychology and elementary particle physics, are connected by BC. Furthermore, while telepathy practitioners are still few, empathy practitioners are even rarer. But the true number of users is not what's important here. It's the fact that an ability such as empathy exists, and also the fact that the existence of information known as the voice of the mind can be observed by others despite previously being unknown to those other than the thinkers themselves. This is indeed the first and biggest paradigm shift of the 21st century. What? The words laid out to him were almost unbelievable. He'd already heard about the ability to directly send one's voice to another's mind. The problem was the other ability. He didn't remember what Ina had told him earlier.
要は離れたところにいる人と意思を伝え合う能力よ。それ以外のことはできないわ。
I see. So what she said when she said mutually communicate, and she didn't just mean sending your thoughts, but also reading other people's thoughts too. The stuff in this book isn't just some pipe dream. Watase looked at the bookshelf in shock to find that many of them had the phrase BC in the titles. Apparently, it really was considered a normal thing. Though there were very few of them, there were indeed people out there who could read others' minds. Just then, Watase finally realized the truth behind his anxiety. I see. So I was scared of this empathy ability. He didn't know exactly why. Maybe he'd been had a really frightening experience with it before he lost his memories. But even if that weren't the case, he didn't feel like there could possibly be anyone who was okay with having their mind read by someone else. No. What if at this very moment, someone was reading my mind and could hear my fear of having my mind read? Watase's body shook violently in the face of that abrupt thought.
それに BC の使い手はなぜか子供に多く、大人で使える人は輪をかけて稀なんだ。
If you were to trust what Jun said, then that probably meant none of the adults in the group were communicators. But what about the children? Could Natsuhiko read minds? Mashiro? Saru? And what about Yuri? Teach said that Natsuhiko and his friends could use telepathy. Then isn't it naturally possible that they can use empathy too? Now that he thought about it, several suspicious events had occurred. Why had Yuri run away from the group? Why had Saru fled from the group back then? Why hadn't they found the 3 survivors yet? If those kids can read people's minds, and when you take into account that they've been running from us, then maybe one of us hates them and they know it. He didn't want to believe it, but it added up. If that were the case, then who was the one that hated them? It wasn't Watase at the very least. He knew that better than anyone. So was it one of the other 4? Once he thought that, every single one of them quickly seemed suspicious in his mind. His anxiety swelled up like a balloon and his heart started racing faster and faster. Doubt begot more doubt, but then soon became full circle. No, wait, maybe it's the other way around. What if they're the ones who hate us? Those kids who could read people's minds were filled with malice and trying to back Watase's group into a corner for some reason. Maybe that was just an absurd theory, but if it's true, then can we fight off guys like that? As soon as he thought that, a sudden headache gripped through Watase's skull, causing him to groan. His consciousness started fading as he grew incredibly dizzy. This is bad. Watase staggered his way out of the reference room as quickly as possible. Watase hurried into a nearby restroom once he'd left the reference room. I cannot read today. He turned the sink faucet on with all his might and washed his face with cold water, but his headache didn't get any better at all. Not another headache. Wait, could this be the effect of radiation damage? It was at that moment that he remembered something Kazami and the others had told him. There's a possibility the tap water had been contaminated by radiation. You could get internal radiation exposure just from drinking it. Ah, shit. He'd been washing his face with that stuff. He frantically wiped his face to make sure none of the water got his mouth or nose. But his headache still hurt just as much as it had before, and as soon as he was assaulted with anxiety and fear that made him feel even worse. Watase vomited into the sink. His stomach was empty, so all that came out were gastric juices. A heavy sense of fatigue weighed down his whole body. Damn it! Thinking about way too much at once. Watase gritted his teeth. Being trapped in this hellish environment was bad enough. But now strange incidents were happening one after another. People had either died or been killed. And on top of that, there might be monsters out there who can read people's minds. Watase was extremely confused. At that moment, countless disconnected images flashed through his mind as if they were conspiring with that confusion. What was all that? It looked like there had been images he didn't recognize and mixed in with that one of Yuri. And that Natsuhiko Tenkawa and his friends, the very same people they were looking for now, had been in them. Why? Have I seen them somewhere before? He didn't know. He couldn't tell if they were his own memories or not. But as Watase was driven to the brink of confusion by those mysterious images.
もういい。笠崎渡せ。そのことについて深く考えるな。
Someone is talking to us. It was the first time in ages he had heard the auditory hallucination. Watase was overcome with astonishment when he heard it. Wait, could this auditory hallucination be trying to control me? That suspicion expanded to immense proportions in one quick moment. No. What if? What if someone's been controlling me this whole time? Then who is the me that I've thought was me up until now? Watase looked at his face in the mirror as he was seized by that primitive fear. Reflected in there was the face of an unfamiliar man he did not recall. Watase felt whatever he'd been keeping himself sane up until this point started to fall apart in an instant. Kazami, Jun, Ina, and Yukita, adults who possibly held some of the malice against survivors? Yuri, Salu, Natsushiko, and Mashiro, children who possibly wielded a mysterious power? And himself, a man with vague memories and a will that might not even be his own.
くそ。俺は何を、誰を信じりゃいいって言うんだ。
Just as Watase started harboring doubts towards everyone, himself included.
考えすぎなんだよ、渡は。考えすぎると臆病になって何にも考えられなくなっちゃうよ。
Watase blinked. It felt like someone else's face was in the mirror, but all he saw there was his own. What was that? Who was that? Perhaps it was a type of audio-visual hallucination, or maybe a flashback. He wasn't sure, but when he saw that face, he felt a mysterious sense of nostalgia come over him.
考えすぎてはダメ。
His heart calmed for some reason when he muttered that. Watase felt as though that illusion had been admonishing him. That's right. I have to trust everyone, and myself. Watase turned off the still-running faucet. Looks like I was just jumping at shadows for a minute there. Watase finally realized that he'd gained his composure. And that his headache was now gone. By the time he left the bathroom, the doubts that had taken hold of him had completely vanished. Watase quickly checked his watch when he left the bathroom. The time was exactly 1:16 p.m. It was right about time to take some more AD, huh? Watase administered himself with one of the ampules he had on him.
しかし、核壁が開くまであと約5時間か。
The road ahead was still long. To make things worse, he was so tired that his body felt like lead at this point. Not that he thought about it, Watase realized he'd only accumulated 4 hours worth of memory since he woke up. In other words, 5 hours was longer than the life Watase could remember so far. Watase walked down the hallway as he felt frustration towards the whole situation, then suddenly heard an unfamiliar voice. The voice appeared to be coming from just past the corner in the hallway right up ahead. He then heard yet another voice echoing.
して私たちから逃げようとするの？
Appeared to be Ina's. Who's Teach talking to? You could tell from the voice that it probably wasn't Jun or Kazami. Watase peeked around the corner to see what was going on. Isn't that? Only to find Salu standing in front of Ina. Watase immediately held his breath and listened in on the conversation.
だいたいあなたの目的は何なの？
それはこっちのセリフ。エナこそなぜここにいるの？昨日は私たちの情報に耳を貸さなかったのに。
それは
Oh god.
あの時も言ったでしょ。ここから先は大人の仕事だって。
つまりこれがあなたの仕事。
What are they talking about? Didn't sound like Salu was talking to Ina the way a student would to a teacher. And the details of their conversation felt private. Watase almost walked out in the open on the instinct, but he stopped himself at the last moment. He remembered how Salu had abruptly run away from him last time. For now, I should trust Teach and watch how things play out. Ina then resumed the conversation.
詳しい話は後よ。とにかく私と一緒に行きましょう。
いや、
Oh, are we going to be able to convince her to come with us? I hope so. Find out next time on Root Double.